Not another Star Trek prequel. It's literally the last thing Star Trek needs right now, in my view. I've previously spoken about the proposed Star Trek Year One concept, which is basically a series that would be a continuation of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, in which Paul Wesley would take over as the main character, and he would be playing Captain Kirk, and it's about his first year as captain of the Enterprise. Ethan Peck would also play Spock, and presumably many of the other Strange New Worlds cast members would continue on that show. Now, Strange New Worlds is about to air its fourth season later this year, and its fifth and final season is already shot, because seasons 4 and 5 were actually shot all in one go. They were shot back to back. And as I said in a previous video recently, the sets for Strange New Worlds have not been torn down yet. And this new Star Trek Year One series would be making use of the same sets because the show would be based primarily on the Enterprise, which makes use of the same sets. So if Strange New Worlds Season 4 is successful, the studio might very well be tempted to give the go-ahead to this Year One series, because even though it would be a new show, technically, they wouldn't have to spend an enormous amount of money getting it off the ground because many of the sets for the show are already built. So it makes it kind of cost effective. Now, I have to say, I don't like this idea very much because once again, Star Trek appears to be stuck in the prequel cycle. It's not moving forward chronologically. The same thing has happened with Star Wars, you may have noticed. A lot of Star Wars TV series recently have been prequels based in different eras of the Star Wars franchise and the Star Wars lore. When it comes to Star Trek, Discovery began as a prequel, and then at the end of the second season, it jumped forward into the 32nd century, into the future. But Strange New Worlds is also a prequel. And then, of course, we had the Kelvin timeline movies. Star Trek's love of prequels actually began way back in 2001 with Enterprise, of course. I'm usually not a fan of prequels, but it was very well done, and it showed us an era of Star Trek that we'd never seen before, the 22nd century. And there were some very interesting stories there to explore. The issue with the prequels since then is that they're actually covering old ground we already know. We've already seen. With Enterprise, we got something tonally and visually unique, a period of Trek history with characters a little closer to us in terms of their attitudes. The 22nd century was a pre-Federation Starfleet and a chaotic and interesting era of space exploration for Captain Archer and his crew aboard the NX-01, where they were pioneering deep space exploration on behalf of humanity. They had to figure out how to do first contact. And through their mistakes and lessons, they ultimately had to develop what we now know as the Prime Directive, Starfleet's General Order 1. Enterprise became the one prequel I was actually happy enough for Star Trek to do because it showed us a previously unseen period in the Trek universe, and it was very well written, although it did take a little while to really find its feet. But beyond that show, I have a problem with the prequels since then. The Kelvin timeline movies, which began back in 2009, they rebooted and visually and tonally changed Star Trek entirely. That's not what Enterprise did. Enterprise was not a reboot. It was not a reimagining of Star Trek. But with the Kelvin timeline movies, they recast characters we already knew. Captain Kirk, Mr. Spock, and the rest of the original series crew. And I don't think that fans really wanted that, by and large. But those Kelvin timeline movies were really made with general audiences in mind first and foremost, and they were less about catering to long-term fans. The purpose of those movies was to transform Star Trek into a big-budget, blockbuster Hollywood film franchise that was something more like the Transformers films, summer popcorn action flicks that pull in $1 billion at the box office, But of course, that's not what happened, and box office returns declined with each film in that trilogy. You can't turn Star Trek into something that it isn't. Star Trek is supposed to be more cerebral, it's supposed to be a little bit more intellectual, it's supposed to be hard sci-fi, and instead, Star Trek was being turned into a generic action franchise. And then, in 2017, Discovery began its life as a prequel, in a period shortly before the original series. But you wouldn't think it to look at it, because it looked nothing like the original Star Trek. It was a visual reboot and a total reimagining. Different uniforms, sets, ship designs, even the Klingon makeup changed, to say nothing about the poor writing and general unlikable characters. Modern Star Trek, in my opinion, has just become one big continuity break, altering the look and feel of Star Trek's history in an effort to change it into something else entirely. It's just become unrecognizable, really. Star Trek Starfleet Academy may be based in the 32nd century, but it doesn't really feel like Star Trek is moving forward when the writing and characters are so appallingly awful. It's just an unwatchable series. In terms of quality, Strange New Worlds is probably a little better than Discovery and Starfleet Academy, although I would say it's marginal. I've spoken many times about my issues with the show, my issues with the writing, characterization, the fact that there's far too many gimmicky episodes in there and it's just too comedic a lot of the time, and I feel as though Star Trek is not being taken seriously on this show. But even if the show was written well, I didn't want to see another prequel. I want Star Trek to move forward in time with new characters, not giving us Pike and Spock and Uhura and Scotty and all the others all over again. Star Trek Year One would be yet another needless prequel and essentially a continuation of Strange New Worlds, but with a different name. It would be akin to a rebranding of Strange New Worlds, a new coat of paint, but the same product underneath, in all likelihood. Star Trek has needed to move forward in a direction that fans recognise. Star Trek Picard Season 3 seemed to be the first proper step towards that, but the follow-up series that many fans hoped for, Star Trek Legacy, unfortunately never materialised. When it came to bringing Star Trek back for the next generation back in 1987, Star Trek was very much future-focused, moving forward chronologically. And Star Trek is supposed to be future-focused. But instead, we're retreading old ground. Star Trek is going back. If Star Trek Year One does get the green light, it'll be yet another Trek prequel most fans didn't ask for. That's the last thing that Star Trek needs. But there you go. Let me know your thoughts, guys, in the comments below. Would you want to see this new Star Trek Year One series about the first year of Captain Kirk in command of the Enterprise and a continuation of Star Trek Strange New Worlds? Looking forward to your comments below. If you haven't already, please subscribe to Computing Forever. Hit that notification bell to be notified of future updates on the channel. Hit that like button. Take care, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.